In an age of fear, instability, and paranoia, in a society filled with crime, violence, and hate, there's always hope, light, and the opportunity for good. Heroes.
Hello, and welcome to Superhero Chat. I'm your host, Jonathan Chestnut. We have three returning panelists for today. Dr. Cary Adkinson, a professor from the Department of Criminal Justice, Josh Pillow, a graduate student in the Department of Criminal Justice, and Ian Murphy, an undergrad, soon-to-be graduate from the Department of Criminal Justice. Viewers may be wondering why we have so many criminal justice types on this show. It makes sense in as much as the superhero world centers around crime and justice. In fact, Cary, didn't you write your doctoral dissertation on Spider-Man? Could you tell us a little bit about that work?
Yeah, sure. The Spider-Man mythos has always been associated with this idea of power and responsibility. And basically what I did in my dissertation is I looked at how that's a metaphor for criminal justice, how Spider-Man, the character, uses his power responsibly, and if he doesn't, people are hurt. In the criminal justice system, the same idea applies, that we have so much power and authority and responsibility that if we don't use that well and we don't use it wisely, then we see injustice and people get hurt in the real world. So I used it as a metaphor for criminal justice.
Well, that's great. I love that. That's an interesting way of combining comics and scholarly activity. Mm-hmm. We have a great show for you today. For Free Talk, we will discuss the theme Superheroes for Beginners, a primer for new fans. For all of us on the panel, it's probably easy to forget that there are people in the world who've never picked up a comic book or even watched a superhero movie. This show is for those people. I'd like to ask my panelists for their advice. How would someone who's new to the superhero genre get started? What backstory should they read? What comics should they start with? Which movies should they watch? Panelists?
I know what movies they shouldn't watch.
We'll start with those. That's always good.
Don't ever watch The Punisher with Dolph Lundgren in it. That's a horrible one.
It's a good movie, though. It's a horrible adaptation, but it's a great movie.
Well, the Punisher is a thing. He blows things up and he wears a skull on his chest. There you go, Punisher. Boom.
But
anybody can do that.
No, sometimes there's an art to the chaos.
Next thing you got to tell me the Nick Fury movie wasn't any good.
So what's
it wasn't.
Right, so
David Hasselhoff should be banned from doing movies.
David Hasselhoff is Nick Fury?
Yeah. Yes.
That was, oh no.
Thank you.
What's the best superhero movie ever? Oh. If I was going to send somebody to a superhero movie, what would I send them
to? You can't go wrong with Spidey 2, the original series, I think, because that kind of encapsulated all that made Peter Parker kind of an everyman hero that you can relate to, but also the sense of adventure and the sense of just the wide scale fights across the city, and it's pretty much for all ages that everybody can get into something like that, I think.
I would say maybe the original Superman.
Okay.
For mine, it wouldn't be a theatrically released one. It would be one of DC Direct's Justice League Doom. It was a pretty good adaptation of Tower of Babel, and plus it gets a lot of the big name heroes involved with it. You get a good aspect of their personalities. It discusses their weaknesses, and you also get to see the conflict between the Justice League themselves and what they believe in and what they feel is right and what should be done versus say what Batman believes in, that everything needs a check and a balance.
Yeah, the Doom thing was interesting because even when I watched it, and I've been doing comics since I was 12. There was a character that the Martian Manhunter's villain. Mm-hmm. And I was like, who is this dude? So I had to go and I had to search him on the internet because there was characters in it that I just had never kept up with. Because comics are such there's so many comics out there. There's independence and everything else. So when we're talking to new people about comics, I always tell people to grab a book that looks good to you and read it, and if it resonates with you, stick with it. Mm-hmm. And you'll find other books. You'll find characters that you like, and you'll build relationships with those characters, and you'll grow out of that. Because I've had people come into my office and like, well, I haven't done comics since I was a kid. What should I do? Just pick one up, see what happens. Watch a superhero movie.
That's one of the great things about having mass market trade paperbacks at places like Barnes & Noble, because you can go in there and kind of flip through them and see if it kind of catches your interest. But the same thing you were saying, like with Netflix and just being able to download movies. I mean, I think one of the things that gets people into stuff is just having the opportunity to kind of look at it and see if it kind of catches their interest or catches their taste. And that at that point, if they find one, that they might be encouraged to go out and find others to hook them.
Yeah. And I like that you brought up the internet aspect of it, because, I mean, now we've got the digital comics coming through. A lot of companies are supporting that. But just, I hesitate to call it a myth, but when people bring up, there's all this backstory and all these things, like let's say you're into Superman or Batman, characters that have been around since before the 40s, I believe. A lot of people think that all these storylines have been continuing since that time frame, but there haven't. I mean, there's been reboots for all that. And really, if you're trying to get into a character, a lot of comics now, either, Marvel does the little preface at the beginning of every book talking about the events that happened prior to it. DC has the editor notes in it to let you know, hey, if they bring this up, read this issue. And, there's a lot of websites out there. DC has their own wiki page. Marvel has their own wiki page. And I understand Wikipedia isn't the most credible for most things, but the people that tend to post on those Wikipedia pages tend to be people that are passionate towards these characters, that will actually try to police themselves in that aspect to make sure the information's right on it.
Yeah, and it's fictitious. So if you write a report and say, Green Lantern's ring is blue, you're not going to blow up a science building by getting out that misinformation. But yeah, you're right, and I use it. Like I said, I've been doing comics for a long time, but there's so much out there you just can't keep up. And so, to the new person, I say, my sister-in-law and and her sister, they don't read comics, but they were fascinated by our enthusiasm to see the Avengers. And so we took them to the Avengers, and now they didn't have the Captain America backstory, but a lot of these characters are iconal. Like Tony Stark, he's an industrialist. He represents future technology. Captain America represents patriotism. Thor represents, power. The Hulk represents power and rage. And so there were easy icons for them to adhere to, and they immediately knew what everything was. The only ones that kind of threw them were like Black Widow and Hawkeye. They didn't really understand.
But that was the genius of how Joss Whedon approached these characters, because he made them relatable. The dialogue was great. The conflict between the characters, the funny stuff that he was, kind of a Joss Whedon, staple, is throwing good dialogue in there that makes you laugh, but it also kind of keeps you involved in the action and the suspense. And those are the kind of things that will pull in, mass audiences into comic book, not necessarily comic book movies, but also comic book reading.
Yeah, so when we were talking about what the best movie was, mine would have been The Avengers, because it's sort of a wide berth of a lot of characters. And, they've talked about doing the Justice League movie, but my concern is that they'll make it too serious. And then you'll feel like you don't know enough about these people. You don't know what motivates them. You knew what motivated Captain America. He told off Iron Man. He told off Thor. And so Joss Whedon had given this great interaction, and that that let us know who these people were and gave us a relationship between them, and that way made it bearable. So I'm concerned about the Justice League movie.
They seem like they're going to rush it though with that Justice League movie. I mean, I heard they want Zack Snyder to direct it. But then there's always the problem of who's going to be Batman, because they're not sure if Christian Bale's going to come back and be Batman. There was rumors that Joseph Gordon-Levitt was going to be Batman, but then who's going to be Wonder Woman?
It seemed like Marvel had a plan. Like they had a way to brand their characters, and they had a way to kind of get everybody invested in the individual stories, so that by the time all the characters came together, you wanted to see how it ended. You wanted to see the resolution.
Most of the characters had movies already of their own before. I think the thing with the DC, if they do Justice League, is you have a Green Lantern movie that failed. You have...
Don't be hating a Green Lantern movie. I get personal on that one.
Sorry about that. I like Green Lantern also, but I'm just saying, man.
It wasn't the best story. They could have come up with a better story.
They could have done that. We don't know about Superman yet. Man of Steel, whether that's going to happen.
It looks good.
Yeah, it looks
good.
Looks
really good.
Dark Knight was successful. They haven't done anything with Wonder Woman yet, and they haven't done anything with Martian Manhunter
Flash.
or whatever, Flash.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, now it's time to answer some superhero questions submitted by our fans. The first one comes from Suzanne, one of our local fans. Who are the top 10 superheroes that everyone should know? We talked about this before the show a little bit, and we were all trying to rattle off our favorite choices. What do we think?
I would say Superman. Everyone has to know Superman. Batman. I'd probably say.
I'll help you keep count.
Hey.
Let's see. Wonder Woman, Fantastic Four as a team, X-Men as a team. Let's see. I want to say Captain America. Let's see. The Hulk. Everyone knows the Hulk.
Iron Man.
Iron Man. I want to say, did I say Batman already? I think I might have said Batman already.
Batman
Don't forget Spider-Man.
Oh, Spider-Man. Of course, everyone knows who Spider-Man is. Everybody's going Spider-Man crazy these days with movies and cartoons and stuff. And
Iron Man's pushing that. I mean,
Yeah.
anything with him.
we are a future technology-driven population. We see Iron Man, and that excites us because the difference is Spider-Man is every man. Anybody could be in the costume, but Tony really is just a dude.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, any one of us could be Iron Man if we had the suit.
Yeah, pretty much.
So,
And I might be going a little bit out of, because I mean, you were talking about a lot of Marvel and DC in here. And one of the ones that I really got into in the late 90s and early 2000s was Spawn. Now, he's more of the anti-hero, along with, say, the Punisher.
Yep.
But he's one that I think, if you're looking at it by time and era in which comics come out at, I thought he was important for, late 90s, early 2000, along with going with, he was one of the original Image characters, I believe, first when you had the whole artist movement.
yeah.
To try and make themselves known.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I also want to say Blade, but more of his movie counterpart and his comic book counterpart.
Well, that was the movie that's widely referred to as the movie that kind of kickstarted the Marvel Universe because its success in showing that comic books characters can be viable on the big screen without kind of making them campy like the original Batman series.
Yeah, and it was also one of the first ones where they moved away from being married to the comic books as far as their story goes. They alter the stories to make a better movie. And I think that's where Marvel and DC both went, oh, the fans will accept it if we make Spider-Man a teenager, even though in the comics he's in college. We can revisit the origin. And so, they've reinvented the Spider-Man origin twice now in like the last decade. And both times I've been happy with how it worked out.
Yeah. I was also going to add, you said something about Spawn kind of being the 90s, superhero du jour. I'd go so far as to say that, in my opinion, Invincible, Image Comics Invincible is kind of playing that teenage superhero is growing into his powers. And again, it's an Image comic, and I'm not sure how much, movie merchandising or whatever they're going to do with this character, but it's been one of the more compelling series that I've read in the last 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, that and Kick-Ass.
Oh, yeah.
We like Kick-Ass. All right, so the next question. Our second question comes from Greg, one of our very own producers who obviously doesn't have enough to do. Name the top 3 superheroes that most people have never heard of, and why are they still important? So now we're pulling into the obscure bucket. I like, I think her name's Sabrina. She's a mutant from Israel.
Okay.
And she was really, I remember her from the 80s because she was the first sort of openly Jewish superhero where being Jewish was, it was in her costume and she had the Star of David and all that. I thought that was interesting. Now, is she important? She's not a huge character in the Marvel Universe, but I thought it was nice to start seeing that kind of diversity among the characters.
Yeah, that's really hard to choose because so many characters are, with the internet and everything, there's so many characters that would kind of traditionally be considered like B-list or C-list characters, but that, kind of like the Guardians of the Galaxy we were talking about. These are characters that most people in the public hadn't heard of, but Marvel's making a concerted effort to make an entire movie out of these lower tier characters. So I'd probably go with a character like Nova. To me, in the 70s when Nova came out, he had a cool costume, he had cool powers. But it's kind of like Marvel's version of the Green Lantern Corps, and I think with the Guardians of the Galaxy movie coming out, because evidently the Nova Corps is going to play a big role in this, I think that's the next kind of breakout character who's poised to make an impact culturally.
See, and I I have bought some of the Nova when they first came out. I am that old that I bought comics in the 70s. So I have the first few issues of Nova in my collection, but my favorite Nova was when he came back with the New Warriors. And basically he had lost his powers and he got them back, and he wasn't really part of the Nova Corps, but he was just a college student with superpowers, and he grew back into this sort of cosmic entity that they're going to be showing in the Guardians. But I like that sort of fumbling, I have powers, but I'm just an everyday kind of thing. It's very relatable to the Spider-Man story, of course, but he was an interesting character, and his costume was a little more contemporary. What do y'all think? You said Blade. Now, Blade's one of those characters a lot of people don't realize that are comics. I
want to say probably Iron Fist and Luke Cage also, because I don't think the average
I was
person
thinking
would
Iron
know
Fist.
about
That's
Yeah. I mean, they both have interesting stories, especially when going back into a criminal justice perspective with Luke Cage, and that goes into that's basically a 70s era comic book right there. Everything that's about it is
almost like blaxploitation.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It's like Luke Cage is like, I'm fighting against the man and all this kind of
I'm wrongfully convicted.
Yeah.
Wrongfully convicted, went back to Harlem. There was blaxploitation. You're either a social worker or a convict. It's like Falcon went back to Harlem as a social worker.
I kind of want to say the same thing. Wasn't it Jon Stewart? Then they kind of do like a little bit of the.
Well, Jon Stewart was just an angry young black man. He got.
So you don't need a cause. You just be angry. And
all right, we got to move on to the third question. Our third question comes from Todd, our other producer, who obviously doesn't have enough to do. Are there comic books that beginners should stay away from? Is there ones that we think they have bad art or bad story? What should people avoid?
Personally, for me, I wouldn't say that there's any really you should avoid from it unless it's. I mean, speaking in terms of superhero comics, I can't honestly think of one. There's ones that I personally don't like, but in terms of comic books in general, the only one I've ever read that I tell people to avoid would be the Silent Hill adaptations, where the art isn't all that great, the stories don't make any sense, and they have some weird, unhealthy obsession with beef jerky. So
there's nothing.
So does Rob Liefeld write those?
I don't know who does those.
Because that's where I would go with that. I mean, to me, there are certain creators, not necessarily comics, because whoever takes control of the characters, they can do their own personal spin on things, and some are better than others. But to me, there are certain creators out there that either their artwork or their storylines or how the direction they take the characers. And that's one of the creators out there that I'm just not really a big fan of his work.
And you brought up Rob Liefeld with it, and it's I believe, did he create Deadpool originally? And that's become one of those characters that became incredibly popular, and he was put into a lot of things.
What he did.
Right, a lot of other authors came in, and he created the look of Deadpool, which is kind of a very generic looking character if you think about it. But all these other writers came in and gave him like the weird personality and the multicolored speech bubbles and
there's I'm with you on the Rob Liefeld. If he's on a book, I don't get near it.
Has he at least learned to draw feet yet?
No.
Oh.
Grant Morrison described him as the end point of a screwdriver.
Yeah.
That's what his feet look like.
He's just gotten to the point that I stay away from any of that stuff with him. The things that I would tell people to avoid is there's a lot of dark genre comics that might be a little deep for people if they're not into that, that are hard to follow. Like the new Dynamite series, the Heroes Return series where Alex Ross did the covers. I mean, it's beautiful work and you'll be drawn to it, but it's a very dark kind of thing for the story itself. I mean, the characters aren't all good and they're very conflicted, very
I would
damaged.
apply that to a lot of Dynamite's books in general because I was reading The Spider recently. And that's, if there's always been an argument, why doesn't Batman kill people? And basically the Spider's just Batman if he killed. But there's this very, fine line in everything he does, and he makes it seem like there's friends, but to me it feels like he's constantly using people throughout the book, and, there's investigations going to try and figure out who the Spider is, but his best friend is the chief of police, and it just gets very convoluted. And
yeah, that's why they're very adult books.
Yeah.
All right, so let's great questions, great answers. Well, that's about all the time we have for today. A big thanks to our panelists, Dr. Cary Adkinson, Josh Pillow, and Ian Murphy. I'm your host for Superhero Chat, Jonathan Chestnut. And remember, you don't have to be super to be a hero. Check us out on YouTube and Facebook at Bronco Television. Until next time, take care.